the recommendations from the council recommends that we open up the Old County Jail. Can you see that this Old County Jail is going to be reopened on the basis of this report, and will it be done this week?
My comments there are that, in my opinion, there is no other temporary solution that we can hope to pursue except by a reopening of the jail immediately. Immediately means as fast as we're able to operate it as a contained unit.
Bomber series. The F-111 has fewer accidents than any of them. The difficulty is that every one of its accidents has been a front-page headline story across the country. One aircraft had 5 tragic accidents in 1 week last November, and it wasn't even mentioned. But I think the truth is going to come through. It has thus far. Senator McClellan, in spite of his determination to get the program canceled, has been unsuccessful. I appeared last week before the House Armed Services Committee. They were very receptive and I think are fully aware of its outstanding operational characteristics.
All of the construction, military construction in the Southwestern Division of Dallas has been concentrated here in the Fort Worth District. We will not know exactly how many employees will be making the move from Albuquerque. We expect next week for employees to be given their indication that they will make the move to Fort Worth. At that time, they will be coming here and being interviewed to be worked into the organization that we have here in the Fort Worth District.
Mr. Kraft, there appears to be somewhat of a difference in figures. Governor Cargo has said that there will be a number of people who will be in Albuquerque. Could you explain the little difference that we have here?
Well, the Albuquerque District performs civil works and military construction too. The civil works group, which amounts to about 300 employees, intends to stay there in the beginning. There was no question that they would be staying there. But it was a military function that they were moving from Albuquerque to Fort Worth, at which time we'd take over the military construction on 15 of the military Air Force and Army bases in the New Mexico, Oklahoma, and West Texas area.
Joe, how does the Lighthouse for Teens help the troubled teenager?
We meet them on the street, or we go to the jail, or we make contact with the family. We try to reach them to offer them any assistance that we can, whether it be advice or of a spiritual nature, or whether it be just to help them get out of jail and get back into the school system. And to continue their education, or whatever the need is, we try to meet that need.
Well, I was out on the streets a couple of days before Christmas, just standing around, and I'd been in trouble with the law on an auto theft, and they'd let me out for Christmas. They told me to turn myself back in Saturday, day after Christmas, and Mr. Miner and another young man walked by and they handed out a tract, and we asked him, jokingly, what's this for? And he turned around and they explained, took our names. He came and visited me and got me out.
You got out of jail. You came here. What does this mean to you?
Well, it means a lot. I was glad to get out and all that. Really what it means is I feel that I'm a point that proving that Lighthouse is doing something with the teens Fort Worthers. This really strikes me.
you think it can really do something for the teenager then?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I see it all the time. Everywhere I go, we're always doing something. We're constantly on the move.
Marxist philosopher has advocated use of drugs and sexual perversions as a means of undermining the American society. But also, these things are being pushed by many individuals that just found that they like them, and so it's spreading more from natural causes than from the communist causes, but the communists started it.
What is the purpose of those on the left for pushing drugs?
Well, they really want to undermine the society and completely destroy it. And what the youth do not realize, the war is really against them. They are being destroyed. They are the cause and the effect and the victims.
How are we to stop the use of drug abuse in this country?
Well, we must reach people and let them understand the dangers. We must tell them the truth. We must get parents to do their part in leveling with youth. We must also provide real incentives, because the job of older people, such as you and me, we can do, and to help get them geared up to take a place in adult society, which the youth wants to do. But the drugs specifically chemically erase a drive to be productive.
Dr. Jones, just what is happening today in the American drug scene?
The American youth have been induced to experiment with drugs, and it's spreading at an enormous rate of 7% increase in their numbers per month. Most of these individuals will end up addicted to the more serious, harder drugs. Many of them will die. Most of them will be maimed and crippled, at least mentally and sexually.
Is there a leftist or communist conspiracy in the promotion of drug usage in this country?
Yes, there is.
Mr. Congressman, what about these 111 hearings in Washington?
Well, you can only call them hearings, I think, by the widest stretch of the imagination. You might call them inquisitions if you're talking about the McClellan Committee
Yes, sir.
Panel. Of course, the McClellan Committee set out initially to discredit the aircraft, and they've had an awfully hard time doing it. They have spread misinformation rather than information, confusion rather than clarity. For example, they have the impression scattered abroad that the F-111 is a dangerous aircraft. The truth of it is that it is the safest aircraft, measured in the number of accidents per miles flown, of any aircraft that's been built since the mid-1950s.
What is this going to do now to help us alleviate the jail problem we have right now?
This report from Mr. Gaston does nothing to relieve the jail overcrowding. This is a matter which is within the responsibility and control of our Commissioner's Court. We have to deal with it on whatever basis we see fit. We'll have a meeting tomorrow, and I'm sure we will discuss the nature of this report. I have only today supplied this to the other members of the court. I wanted our committee to have its discussions before we did release it for general discussion.
The nearly round-the-world trip of Dallas millionaire H. Ross Perot is about halfway complete. Halfway only in terms of mileage traveled, more than half complete in terms of things accomplished. These last 2 days in Vientiane, Laos will be described as some members of the press as partial failure. There will be others who will describe it as Ross Perot's greatest hour. This trip began from Dallas, Texas, on its way across
this is still a temporary solution to a problem. Crime increase, the number of prisoners we're seeing held and so forth continue to increase. We've got to look for another solution. And I think this solution will have to be found in a bond issue to the public to either add floors to the present building where the jail is, or to build another building and move some of the courts out and put the jail there, or some other approach. But it will take a bond issue of the public and public support before this can be accomplished.
It'd be a national campaign. Monday on the 6th, our national staff will get together in Atlanta to decide whether or not we will have a national campaign centered around the ideas that Dr. King left with the staff. If there isn't a national campaign, we in Operation Breadbasket will further our program here based on the economic program that he left us.
Do you have any specific plans then for Dallas?
In this month, April, we'll move directly into Operation Breadbasket. Selective buying, economic boycotts, negotiations. We're hoping for meaningful negotiations without boycotts of selective buying, but if necessary, we will be doing this.
WFAA would put an additional restriction on that 11th game, which I think would have made for a very interesting situation in college football, to restrict either by the number of years that you could schedule in advance, or even to go further than that and say that you could not schedule your 11th game until 5 games of the football season had gone by, which meant that the game would be played by teams around the country after the pattern of college football was developing during the year. As you well know, the Southwestern Conference winner must play in the Cotton Bowl. The Big Ten champion must play in the Rose Bowl, which precludes putting together teams like Ohio State and Notre Dame, or Penn State and Ohio State, or the winner of the Big Ten Conference, or the Southwestern Conference champion playing in anything other than the Cotton Bowl itself. If you had this wild card set up, I think it would give teams an opportunity to play one another at the conclusion of the regular season, prior to the bowl game, which would come closer to a national championship game, because the likelihood of a national championship playoff is very remote. To get representation on a national basis of all the conferences and all the major independents is virtually impossible. And this is why I was hopeful that they would put a restriction. They didn't, which means the teams are scheduling in advance, 6, 8, 10 years in advance of their 11th game. So this is the way it's going to have to be. We have not decided, I should say, we have decided not to play an 11th game in 1970. But it's conceivable by mid-season or by the 8th game that we could throw a challenge out to another team to make it our 11th game on the first Saturday after the conclusion of the regular season.
We feel very good. We're pleased, and I hope that this is a trend that will continue through into the general bids, and that we'll see even a greater reduction on the general bids.
If this trend does continue, do you think that the amount of money that you would have to come up with over what is allotted would be amount that would be reasonably able for you to come up with?
I'd rather comment on that after we see all the figures and I have had a chance to completely analyze them.
I think the most important thing is the fact that we are bearing witness to the dead man, Martin King, and to his ideas, and to what we feel about him. And in this, we may open up people's eyes to other problems and issues in the city here.
Is this march any part of a program to further Martin Luther King's ideas?
Very definitely.
We this morning did what was necessary to move $200,000 from Road and Bridge funds over into the general fund to help fund the cost of $278,000 additional for the operation of an additional jail, the old jail. 78,000 of this will come from the additional 78 will come from the unallocated reserve. Then in June or late June, just prior to the time of our statutory requirement of setting a tax rate and so forth, we will reevaluate the county's fiscal position and at such time make determination on whether or not we have to do any other changing of monies from one fund to another.
Mr. Benson, what do you foresee as some of the great issues of our time?
Well, I think that what we're all concerned about right now is the cost of living and doing something about it. All you have to do is go down to the grocery store and try to buy something or buy a suit of clothes or a car, and you know how everything has gone up. So I think really fighting inflation is one of the big ones. I just don't believe that a senator should go wading into every problem these days and say that the only solution is just to spend, 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 or to have another appropriation bill. In this day of shrinking dollar and tight money and high interest rates, we can't have the government also fanning the flames of inflation.
It's been charged recently that you had a $70 million cash reserve. Would you care to comment on this?
That's a pretty wild statement, and that's the type of thing that usually happens when the incumbent senator gets in trouble. He starts listing some real irresponsible statements. Now, what he's talking about, I guess, is the reserves of a life insurance company that are owned by all the policyholders. That's the only figure I can think of.
In the matter of discipline in our nation's schools today, there are some students who want to run the schools. Where do you think the power to run the school should be, and what do you think the role of the classroom teacher should be?
Power is a very interesting word, and I'll speak directly to the students. I think students have a right to pursue creatively their own education, because classroom teachers nor any other group can assume the responsibility of the direction that an individual takes. We each have to assume this. But in any organized society, whether it be the classroom or in society at large, there have to be rules and regulations, and there has to be someone who is responsible for this carrying out of the rules and regulations.
In the event that some actions are necessary, what recourse do these men have, and is there any possibility that they might be reinstated somewhere along the line?
Well, they certainly do have. This is the right of any government employee that after a decision like this would be made at the local facility level or within our organization at the proper level, they then have appeal rights that they can go either through the appeal procedures of the FAA or to the Civil Service Commission if they so elect, or in certain cases, they do have the right to go to the court for a final review. Over.
Phil, I think the most important goals of any institution, and our institution has definitely set them forth, is to get our American people back on the idea that a good day's work, hard work, faith in country, faith in one another, respect for the dignity of our citizenry, no matter who they may be, and the idea that this nation has a mission in the whole world, and that mission ought to be to provide a leadership that commands respect. So Freedom's Foundation looks at it this way. We would like to see some great goals, such as the cleaning up of our communities. We talk about ecology, 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 but the first thing to do is to clean up the dirty cities of this nation, and this can be done because human hands put the dirt there and only human hands can take it away. That ought to be a voluntary operation.
You may recall in those telethons the night before the campaign ended in 1968 that then Vice President Nixon, now President Nixon, accused Vice President Hubert Humphrey of being for school busing to achieve racial balance. Vice President Humphrey, in his telethon from Los Angeles, denounced that statement as false and said he had never advocated busing students to achieve racial balance. I agree with my party on that, with my candidate Hubert Humphrey. Support him on that basis. I've never supported busing of students just to take them across town to get an equal mix in the schools.
And I have never received one penny from anyone that's a member of my staff. And I'd like to hear the judge, just Judge Meade, that's my opponent, make a statement like that too. I'd like for him to say that he has never received any money from anyone that had a case pending before him in court, or a relative of anyone that had a case pending before him in court, or has received any money from a lawyer, a trial lawyer that has cases pending before him in court.
Congressman Collins, do you have any evidence that indeed Judge Meade has accepted
I have nothing
money?
on Judge Meade. I have absolutely nothing. You know, I never had this subject ever come up before, and I just wondered why he brought it up.
Part-time on your staff had a listed salary of some $25,000, I think it was.
He made $19,000 last year. And he was the man in charge of this district, and that's about what I find that comparable congressional salaries pay the man that's in charge of the field district. Now, this young man you're talking about is 35 years of age. He's always gone to school. He goes to school now, and he is no longer on our staff.
What happened to the other $6,000 or so there between what he was paid and what was listed as his salary?
No, he was paid $19,000. That was an ambiguous mistake that was listed. He made $19,000. The $19,000 is how much he was paid last year. That's what you wanted to know.
Is to get balance on it, to have
all areas represented, and to have certainly the president have a flexibility of getting people on there that he thinks. And then if the system works, heck, and if people don't like that, why, they elect another president, he brings a different kind of a balance to the court. Charles Allen Wright of the University of Texas, one of the foremost constitutional lawyers, really is worth reading on this. I put something in the record that he said a couple of weeks ago. I don't have the exact reference, but he talks about the president would be derelict in his duty if he didn't bring to the court the philosophical views that the people elected him to bring to the court.
The new Dallas Convention Center had its first convention here today, held, of course, by the Dallas Boneheads on the event of their 50th anniversary. The first event of business was the payment of the exorbitant rental fee of $2.75. Auditorium Director Pye Vanderslice was on hand personally to accept the fee. The club, led by its president, Charlie Hendricks, has several reasons why the convention center should not be built any more than it is now. They think the $35 million should be given to, as they put it, Charlie Galvin's War on Poverty. Half of the money, they say, should go for indigent, newly retired lawyers. Also, Charlie Hendricks says that the convention here, as it is now, would result in shorter conventions. Bonehead Club feels that, particularly in August, the weather would make conventions shorter, and that way there could be more of them. Perhaps it is in the tradition of short convention that today's Bonehead Convention ended rather abruptly with the appearance of the speaker, Representative Jack Blanton.
You could have have a lot of...
How do you do, Mr. Turner? Bill King. Glad to meet you. We really appreciate your cooperating with us to deliver all this money.
Thanks, sir. We have the sum of $2.75.
Right.
Located adjacent to the beautiful Trinity River, and it will accommodate any modern convention crowd that you can think of, possibly excluding only the Billy Graham Crusade, which after all is only a single-shot deal. But we can handle any other type convention that comes along. Look at the size. For us to get into the serious part of this program now, I'd like to introduce to you at this time Mr. Jack Blanton, who will make our address. Jack, the mic is all yours. Well, gentlemen,